Welcome to The Explainer. Just a few days ago, the market was pretty much convinced we were getting an interest rate cut in December. Well, that bet is suddenly looking a whole lot shakier. So let's break down exactly why the odds have shifted so dramatically.
So let's get right to it. Is that December interest rate cut still happening? This week, we got a couple of pieces of new information that point to a pretty clear answer. And I'll tell you, for anyone hoping for lower rates, it's probably not the answer you want to hear. Right now, the probability of a December rate cut has absolutely plummeted, down to just 40%. That's a massive drop from what was basically a coin flip just a few days ago. Some of the betting markets are even more pessimistic, putting the odds of no cut as high as 64%.
Okay, so what in the world happened to cause such a big swing? It really comes down to two key pieces of data that just dropped, and they have completely changed the calculation for December. Let's unpack them.
First up, let's take a peek inside the Fed itself. The minutes from their October meeting just came out, and honestly, they paint a picture of an institution that is really divided and, frankly, uncertain about what to do next.
So, the Fed is basically caught between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, you have some members who are really worried about a stalling labor market, that things could slow down too fast and cost people their jobs. But on the other hand, you have members who are terrified that if they cut rates too soon, inflation will just roar back to life. And right now, they just can't seem to agree on which of those dangers is the bigger threat.
And you can really feel that fear of inflation in the minutes. It seems like a lot of this division comes from not wanting to repeat past mistakes. Like when they called inflation transitory, only to watch it absolutely skyrocket. That memory is clearly still fresh, and it's weighing heavily on their decisions.
Now, this kind of uncertainty has very real consequences. The second the market got a whiff of the Fed's indecision, it reacted. The 10-year Treasury yield, which is a really important benchmark for things like mortgage rates, it just spiked. It's a perfect example of how these internal debates at the Fed can directly hit the cost of borrowing for all of us.
All right, now for the second major piece of the puzzle that's making the Fed's decision so tricky: the latest jobs report. This was the first real look we've had at the labor market since the government shutdown. So believe me, all eyes were on this data.
And boy, were the results a surprise. The economy added 119,000 new non-farm jobs in September. That absolutely crushed expectations, which were way down around 50,000. The job market was just way stronger than anyone thought.
And it wasn't just that. At the same time, the unemployment rate came in at 4.4%. This also beat what people were expecting, since some economists were worried we might tick up to 4.5%. So not only are we adding more jobs than we thought, but the overall unemployment picture is holding up really well.
So why does this matter so much? Well, this strong jobs data completely undermines that argument that the labor market is stalling. It's just not falling apart. And that gives the Fed all the cover it needs to hold rates right where they are, which really dials down the pressure to rush into a rate cut in December.
Okay, so we've got a divided Fed and a job market that's surprisingly tough. What does all this actually mean for the average person? Well, there's a really interesting indicator we can look at from the housing market, and that's a big drop in what's called buyer's remorse.
You know that feeling where you get swept up in a bidding war, you finally win, and then you lie awake at night wondering, did I just pay way too much for this place? That was a huge problem for home buyers during the frenzy of the last couple of years.
In fact, just last year, in 2023, a full 15% of recent homebuyers said they felt like they'd overpaid for their property. That is a ton of regret floating around the housing market.
But just look at this shift. Today, that number has been almost cut in half, dropping all the way down to just 8%. That is the lowest level of post-purchase remorse that we have seen in 2 years.
So what does this tell us? It suggests that home buyers have really adjusted to this new reality of higher interest rates. The folks who are actually in the market right now are more serious, they're more confident in what they're doing, and they're feeling a lot less regret after they sign on the dotted line.
So let's put all of this together. What are the big takeaways from this wave of new information? How do all these different pieces of the puzzle fit into the bigger picture for the economy?
Let's just quickly recap what we've seen. We have 3 really powerful signals, and they're all pointing in the same direction. First, that strong jobs report, it argues for holding rates steady. Then, the Fed's own internal division, that creates a natural bias towards doing nothing. And finally, the stable housing market with less buyer's remorse reduces any urgent need for cut. All of this gives the Fed a really strong justification to just wait and see. And that really leaves us with the central question. While all the data seems to be flashing a clear signal to hold steady, the Fed's own stalemate inside that meeting room makes their next move anything but a sure thing. The numbers might say one thing, but the human element of fear and uncertainty, that's the real wild card here.